Welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I am Michael Pinter, where I teach you how to start flipping and wholesaling houses in New York, or if you're already doing it, how to grow your business. So I get asked a lot about entity questions. So what is the best entity to own in? I'm going to talk about what I've seen, a little bit of what I know about things that are done in other states, and some kind of best practices. Okay, so I believe every investor should have an overarching LLC, right? Create a limited liability company. Limited liability companies are really pretty much the most amazing things ever created for people like us because they are easy to start, they are simple, and we have the option on how to file taxes on them. So if you're a single member LLC, it really passes through straight to you. You don't even have to file a return for the LLC. That's amazing, right? It saves money on accounting, very easy. And if you believe at some point that you're going to have tax advantages of filing as an S corp, you could do that too, where the property you'll pass through, but you will have to file a separate return for it. But you could file as a C corp, as an S corp. It could be anything. It's an amazingly easy product, and I've done videos on how simple it is to create an LLC. So the first 6 years I did this, every time I created an LLC, I called a law firm in Albany, and they created an LLC, and they sent me a book. All right, we'll still have a bunch of these books, probably have 200 of the books of these things. And, when they charged me, it was, $400 every time I opened one. I did that because because for the first 4 years I did this, I renovated every property, and I was taking investor money on it. So I created a separate bank account for every single property. That made things much easier for me to do accounting, right? If I needed more money in the account, I knew I needed it. The money went in, I'd have to track where it came from. It made life much simpler when I had to do basic bookkeeping. The only time it gets complicated is if you're buying like a lot of materials and you're going to use them in separate places. That's where it gets complicated. So I tried to avoid that. Bought most of my stuff at Home Depot, and I labeled every single purchase with, labeled every single purchase with an address. So you should have an overarching LLC. Now the question then is when you buy a property, do you put it in a separate LLC? So the best practice is to open a separate LLC for every property you buy, and I'm going to explain why. It's a beautiful thing to own a property in an LLC, and then to sell a property out of that LLC, and then have an LLC that has no assets. And the reason why that's a beautiful thing is because if you get sued for anything, you can basically tell the plaintiff to go fly a kite. That's my nice version of that. Basically, go screw yourself. Because I had a situation where it was a little bit complicated. There was a lawsuit. Well, how far back do I go on this? I bought a property from a guy who had bought the property from somebody to rescue him out of foreclosure. The guy was telling me one story that he had put money up to save this guy out of foreclosure, which makes sense. And he had created a note from the first guy to the new guy. I bought the property from him. And then the old guy I evicted. And when I was evicting that guy, he said that he got screwed and that guy really owes him money, but he had no paperwork to recover it, and we had no problems getting title. Bought the property, and then I think to fix the property up, evicted him, fixed property up and sold it and made a profit. He started a suit against me and the other guy. And I was defending this suit after I had sold the property. At some point, I asked my attorney, who I'm paying for, my litigator, hey, just a quick question. If he gets a default judgment against the LLC, and the LLC doesn't own anything anymore because we sold the property, what can he collect? He goes, he can't collect anything. I said, okay, please stop billing me and defending this suit because I'm basically foolproof. He can't go after me personally. The LLC bought the property, and the LLC has no assets. So even if he got a judgment against me for $1 million, against a judgment against the LLC, there's nothing to collect. So that's a beautiful thing. Now, another reason why it's best practice every time you close on a property to have it in a separate LLC is because you want to limit the liability. So, for example, if I have 10 houses and somebody trips and falls in front of one of them and they sue you and they're all owned in one LLC, they can, and they get a judgment, right? Which is also unlikely. Let's be honest. This is an unlikely event. But if they can prove negligence in some way, they could collect from other properties. But if you have a separate LLC and they sue that LLC, they're limited to liability of that asset only that house. That's good. Now, having said that, I did that for many years. I've gotten a little lazy lately. I've bought a bunch of properties, and some of them are in my general LLC. So I'm going to have to deed them over to separate LLCs. I also do not open a separate bank account every time because it became tedious. And if I'm wholesaling most half or a little more than half of my properties, I don't need a separate LLC for it. So there are times where I think I'm going to wholesale something and I don't, and I close on it and I forget to open a new LLC. I can always open a new LLC later, and you can always deed the property into that. But best practices for sure is every property you own a separate LLC. Now again, there are people who think what I'm saying is insane because they think that opening a new LLC is complicated, is cost prohibitive. They think it's going to be thousands of dollars. It's literally $200. You can look up my YouTube channel for when I did it. It takes 3 minutes to create an LLC. That's it. It's super easy. I don't know if it's easy in every state, but it's super easy in New York, which is a strange thing to hear those words coming out of my mouth because most things are not easy in New York. But the Department of State figured out a way to do it easy. Greg, are you listing every single LLC that you ever opened? Is that what you're doing here? And did you sell 58 Ores Mills? Because that I know was a bitch of a property. Okay, so that's best practice. Now people ask me about a trust, and I've heard things about a trust from other people. I don't know anybody who conducts business in a trust in New York. I don't know why that is. It may be something specific to New York. It may not be. But I know that if I came in and was telling people that they were going to buy in a trust, people would, oh, you sold it, good. Small loss, not bad. People would think I'm out of my mind. It's just something that doesn't happen here. I know it's very, very common in California and other places, land trusts and all those things. We really don't do them in New York. So is it better? Maybe. The advantage of a trust is that they can't even find, if it's a trust in certain states or the way it's structured, they can't even find who the owner is to sue. That's great. With an LLC, it's usually you're findable, right? So I wouldn't even think about using a trust in New York. I think if you come to a seller and say I'm buying it in a trust, they may think you're nuts. So I would say to avoid it. Okay, I'm going to mention something that makes no sense for the sake of Greg. I'm going to mention the Canine Hunger Prevention Program. Okay, moving on. Inside joke. So these entities, as I said, they're easy to do. The reason why you set up an entity, you never buy something in your name. There is one advantage of buying things in your name. It was an advantage for me. It may not be an advantage for you. The advantage of buying a property in your own name, the only advantage I know of, is that you can evict a tenant and represent yourself. I would prefer that. When I first started in the business, before I was doing this full time, I used to do my own evictions. I'd much rather do my own evictions. I'd rather do it than hire an attorney. But you cannot do that if you own a property in an LLC. But the advantages to owning properties in LLCs outweigh that small event, especially if you don't know how to do evictions. You're never going to do an eviction yourself. You hire an attorney anyway. So you definitely should create an overarching LLC. That's going to be your business name. And then every time you buy something and close on it, create an LLC for that. That's best practice. Trust, I really don't think they apply in New York. I don't know anybody who does business like that in New York. That's pretty much it. So again, the huge advantages of buying properties in an LLC are A, preventing yourself from having liability, so your own personal assets won't get sued if it comes to it. And let's be really honest here. The chance of you getting sued for any major amount of money are much smaller than you think. Unless you're a super wealthy guy, right? So if you're a guy who's got $50 million in personal assets, you really want to make sure you have it in an LLC. But if you're someone with minimal assets, you're probably not going to get sued for it. Like, I don't want to talk about auto liability and things like that. It's out of the purview of our discussion. But I would say everybody who's in this business should create an LLC. If you buy a property, create a new LLC. If you're going to rehab the property and you're taking investor money, you might want to create a new bank account for that. It's pretty easy to open a bank account. You really need 4 documents from the LLC. You need the filing receipt, at least with my bank, I bank with TD, filing receipt, articles of organization, and the EIN number. I think that's it, and then they'll create a new LLC for you. So it's easy. I opened a million bank accounts like that, closed them all, but it got tedious. So that's the basic gist of it. Open an LLC. I would do business in LLC. I do business in LLC. That's what I recommend. So I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in all the ways that can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in finding out more about one-on-one coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on any media channel, please click the thumbs up. The likes really help my SEO. A lot more people have been seeing my videos lately, and I thank you for that. and I post 5 times a week. I don't know what to say. This came from a comment, so please keep the comments coming. Greg's asking about an S corp. An S corp has to file its own taxes, even though the income passes through. So it's more work for you. If you create an LLC, you have the option of filing it as an S corp or a C corp. So I'd say an LLC really is the best of all worlds. It's really one of the greatest corporate entities that were ever created, and it's certainly good for us. So please keep the comments coming. If it's something simple, I'll just reply with an answer. If it's something I've covered before, I'll send you links to a video or multiple videos on it. And if it's something new, I will do a new video on it like I did now. Thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it.